Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashoda Nandana Vraja Janaranjana Yashoda Nandana Vraja Janaranjana Yamunatila Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavalabha Girivardhari Yashoda Nandana Vraja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Nitai Gora Haribo, 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 Gora Haribo. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai, Grantaraja Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam ki jai, Shridham Mayapur Dham ki, Gaur Premanande. Om Agyana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Muktale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuttapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavangscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tang Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitangscha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Vancha Kalpatrubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namosute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Once more. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So, Suprabhatam, good morning everyone, on this beautiful foggy morning in Śrīmad Mayapur. Hare Krishna. I'm happy to be here with you reading and discussing the Bhagavatam. I'm very fortunate to have this opportunity, and I beg for all your blessings that we can have some nice, inspiring, and illuminating discussion on the subject of Devahuti's lamentation. This is the name of the chapter 23 of the third canto of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Deving Saraswating Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye Nashta Prayesha Vavadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhakti Bhavati Naistiki. So Naishtiki Bhakti, that's what we're interested in, and that's what we can receive by hearing the Bhagavatam, discussing the Bhagavatam. Today we have actually 3 verses. The last of these 3 is written on the board, and I will first chant the first 2. These verses are spoken by Maitreya Rishi to Vidura, as is most of the 3rd canto and 4th canto of the Bhagavatam. Divya upetam sarva-kāla sukha-āvaham paṭṭikābhiḥ patākābhiḥ vicitra-ābhiḥ alaṅkṛtam sragbhiḥ vicitra-mālyābhiḥ mañju śiñjat ṣaṭ-aṅghribhiḥ dukūla kṣauma kauśeyaiḥ nānā virājitam. Translation: the castle was fully equipped with all necessary paraphernalia, and it was pleasing in all seasons. It was decorated all around with flags, festoons, and artistic work of variegated colors. It was further embellished with wreaths of charming flowers that attracted sweetly humming bees, and with tapestries of linen, silk, and various other fabrics. So we're getting a description of this Vimana created by Kardama Muni. And it continues with the verse we can now read together. Upari vinyasta. Upari vinyasta. Nilayeshu pritak. Nilayeshu pritak. Kshiptai kashipubi kantang. Kshiptai kashipubi kantang. Paryanka vyajanasanai. Paryanka vyajanasanai. Upari vinyasta. Nilayeshu pritak. Kshiptai kashipubi kantam. Paryanka vyajanasanai. Ladies? One more. Upari, one upon another. Vinyasta, placed. Nilayeshu, in stories. Pritak, separately. Kshiptai, arranged. Kashipubhi, with beds. Kantam, charming. Paryanka, couches. Vyajana, fans. Asanai, with seats. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Translation: the palace looked charming, with beds, couches, fans, and seats, all separately arranged in 7 stories. And there's a short purport. It is understood from this verse that the castle had many stories, many levels. The words upari vinyasta indicate that skyscrapers are not newly invented. Even in those days, millions of years ago, the idea of building many-storied houses was current. They contained not merely 1 or 2 rooms, but many different apartments, and each was completely decorated with cushions, bedsteads, sitting places, and carpets. And so ends Srila Prabhupada's purport to this verse. In this chapter, again, which is titled Devahuti's Lamentation, for reasons that become clear later in the chapter. It's interesting that the chapter is introduced in the last verse of the previous chapter. Maitreya says, "Please hear as I speak of the flourishing of his daughter," that is Swayambhuva Manu's daughter, Devahuti, flourishing. Tat apatyodayam shinu. So Udaya. We have the Chandradoya, Mayapur Chandra Udaya Mandir. Udaya means rising. Chandra is moon, so the rising moon of Mayapur. This is the meaning of this temple. Sri Mayapur Chandrodaya Mandir. That same word, Udaya, is translated as flourishing of Devahuti. Devahuti is flourishing. Is she flourishing or is she lamenting? Or both? As we understand from this chapter, Devahuti has been undergoing austerities. I would like to suggest that the entire series of verses and chapters in which Devahuti appears leading up to Rameshwar Prabhu, I'm sorry, excuse me, but I find it distracting when you are speaking. But, oh, okay. No, that's, now I apologize to you. No, Hare Krishna. Thank you. That these verses leading up to the appearance of Kapila Dev are preparing us for Kapila Dev's appearance. So there's a process. And more broadly, I think it's interesting to reflect on how the Bhagavatam speaks about birth, broadly speaking, as literal birth and also figurative birth. And when I say figurative birth, I'm including all the narrations about creation. We get different accounts of creation, and there will be more accounts coming in later chapters of the third canto as Kapila Dev speaks about this subject from the perspective of Sankhya. So the Bhagavatam is framed in the context of the preparation of Maharaj Parikshit to end his life. So it's a story, you can say, Prabhupada says that it's the beautiful story of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That's what the Bhagavatam is. But in that story, there are many stories about creation, janmadyasya yataha, etc., starting with the first verse of the Bhagavatam. And there are many stories about death, because why is the Bhagavatam being spoken? It's being spoken to prepare Maharaj Parikshit for the end of his life. And of course, with that, it's also preparing us for the end of life. And so there are many accounts of death. And this leads me to reflect on Devahuti's sojourn, we may say, in comparison, or perhaps in contrast, anticipating in Canto 4 the sojourn, the situation of Sati. But before we go there, we might go first back and consider how the story of Devahuti's eventually receiving the blessing of her husband and receiving the children, the 9 daughters, and then the 1 son. We may compare that, or we may want to contrast with the situation of Diti, who has also appeared in the 3rd canto. As we know, Diti was very eager to have union with her husband, and the timing was a problem, but she was not concerned about that. And the results we can say, were the 2 births, the more or less twins, Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu. We have Diti in that situation, in that mood. It contrasts that with that of Devahuti, how Devahuti ever so patiently is waiting on her husband, waiting for his blessings, and then finally receiving those blessings. I must admit, I think the feminists would have a real heyday with the description of Devahuti and her patient, austere humility, because they would be asking, well, what about Kardama? Did he perform austerity? Well, yes, he did. In any case, what we read today is it's an invitation to picture one aspect of the blessing that Devahuti receives. It is a mystical Vimana. It is created by Kardama Muni by his mystic power. We always hear this word mystic in relation to yoga. And yoga is in the sort of classical philosophical traditions of India, the Śat darshan. Scholars tell us that this selection of 6 darshanas does not really come into the written record, at least, until around the 14th century. But of these darshans, they tend to be paired, and yoga tends to be paired with Sankhya. And Sankhya is going to be the topic of much of the remainder of the third canto. So it may be relevant to think, what is this yoga in relation to Sankhya in terms of the accomplishments of yoga. We hear so much about yoga siddhis. We hear that they happen for the yogis. We also hear that they are not interesting for Vaishnavas, and so on. Still, we may wonder about these yogic siddhis. Have we seen anyone levitate? Have we seen anyone become heavier than the heaviest, and so on? The 8 different types of perfection are there. And there are many more described in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. We might look at those later, we can see. But the question may arise, what's really going on with these yoga siddhis? How are we to understand them? So, pardon me for referring to Western scholarship sometimes, but sometimes I'm involved in reading some of that. And I think it may be interesting for us because Srila Prabhupada urged us to approach what he called the intelligent class. Now we may say, well, the so-called scholars are not the intelligent class, but that's a subject we can discuss. But the point I want to make here is that the scholars who engage with ideas such as we find in the Yoga Sutras or in the Bhagavatam about yoga perfections, they may go into 2 or 3 different categories. One of them would be essentially dismissive, saying, or we may say reductionist. They are likely to say that, well, what they're speaking about, that someone created a castle in the sky, can be explained. They're always looking for explanation. So it may be explained by sociological or psychological factors. Someone is very creative in their imagination, so much so that something described as we have just read becomes real for them. Okay, that's interesting, but we can understand that that is simply a psychological function, which is actually a dysfunction. Why can we say that? We can say that because we stand apart from this phenomenon, and so we can judge in that way. So that would be one sort of approach that people, scholars will take. Another is more open, we could say, to the possibility that there is something to what's being said, what we're reading here. And often how this works is through a concept that's become something of a popular notion in recent decades, and that is what is called phenomenology. Phenomenology is the study of phenomenon, which is to say, we're not going to judge the truth or falsity of what someone claims. We respect what they claim as being their experience. And all we're going to do is describe it. We're going to describe it as best we can and empathize with it. And we might even, depending on who you speak to, which phenomenologist, we might even see if we can participate in that in some way. So that's a second possibility. A third possibility, which I would say comes significant steps closer to what we might be interested in as devotees, is to think about yoga siddhis in relation to the metaphysics of Sankhya. And what I mean by that is that if you take the time and the effort to analyze, which is what Sankhya is really, in one sense, a kind of process of deconstruction of what we perceive to be reality. It's a reduction down to essentials, to the point where one can realize, I'm not that. I am Purusha. I am not Prakriti. I am separate from Prakriti. And through that process, which is practiced particularly through yogic concentration, in the Yoga Sutras, in the third chapter, third pada, Vibhuti pada, it's, as I mentioned, describing all these siddhis, and invariably they are the result of a practice called samyama. Samyama is then explained as being the combination of dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. All three of the last three of the 8 elements of Ashtanga Yoga are combined as samyama. And samyama is practiced on specific objects. And when one perfects that samyama, that focus on a particular object, one gets a result. One gets a certain power. But the general sense of it is that one is sort of deconstructing and penetrating down to the basics, to the point where instead of being controlled by Prakriti, one becomes a controller of Prakriti. Now there's an interesting possible parallel here with what is known in the West as alchemy. You've all heard of alchemy? No? Alchemy, we have a verse, let's see if I can remember it. Yata kanchanatam yati kāṅsyang rasavidanata tata dikshavidanena dvijatvam jayate nrinam. It's an analogy that's given in the Hari Bhakti Vilasa for the process of diksha. And it's exactly describing alchemy. Rasavidana. So by a process of rasavidana, you can transform bell metal, kamsya, into kanchana, into gold. That's the theory. In a similar way, tata, diksha vidanena, by the transformative process of diksha, dvijatvam jayate, second birth happens, it arises. Nrinam, for persons. It doesn't say for certain kinds of persons, it says for persons, for potentially anyone. That's alchemy. So alchemy, how does alchemy work? Don't ask me. Alchemy works, theoretically at least, there's a lot of theory over the centuries, but the little bit that I understand of it is, it's based on the idea that that elements, metals, if you can get to the basic metal that's sort of underneath the metal, then you can get to, then you can transform it. So that's something like what we're doing in the practice of bhakti. Jiver swarupa hoy Krishna nityadas tatasta shakti veda veda prakash. We're boiling down to this recognition of who we are. Fundamentally, we are eternal servants of Krishna. And then from there, we can unfold, we can develop our devotional connections, our devotional service, devotional relations. So an alchemical process is one way of understanding what also what Devahuti is going through. Devahuti, after this, she's going to get a major bath. And this entering into water, entering into water, in all cultures of the world, practically speaking, is understood to be culturally transformative. Rites of passage typically involve water. And so as we read the next verses, excuse me, we may keep that in mind, that she is going through a transformation, preparing herself to receive that Lord who is going to teach her Sankhya. Not just any Sankhya, but devotional Sankhya. Sankhya, which is transformed. Because classical Sankhya, we understand, is, if not atheistic, non-theistic, but the Bhagavatam's Sankhya is pervaded in wonderful ways by devotional character. So this gets us back to the subject of the specifics of what we are invited to picture. And now what I want to suggest is that as we read, the castle was fully equipped with all necessary paraphernalia, and it was pleasing in all seasons. It was decorated all around with flags, festoons, and artistic work of variegated colors. It was further embellished with wreaths of charming flowers that attracted sweetly humming bees, and with tapestries of linen, silk, and various other fabrics. The palace looked charming. with beds, couches, fans, and seats all separately arranged in 7 stories. What's happening? We're being invited to use our imagination to picture a flying palace. We don't usually see flying palaces. Perhaps you have visited some palace, some museum. I remember years ago, too many years ago, visiting Hearst Castle in California. Anyone from California here? Hearst Castle was built, I think, in the early 20th century by a man named William Randolph Hearst, who became very wealthy from publishing newspapers and telling all nonsense in his newspapers. And he became so wealthy that he started collecting antiques from especially from Europe. He would send his people to Europe to buy up antiques. He had so many antiques that he didn't even see them all himself. He had catalogs made in warehouses and photos made so he could look through his photos. Oh, I own this and I own that, and oh, it's so wonderful. And he built this castle, and he kept adding on to this castle, adding on. Indra did this once also, according to one of the Puranas. Did you know that? Yeah, he was engaging. I think he was engaging Mayadanava as an architect, and having him expand his palace and his gardens and garden houses, and his architect was getting a little tired from all of this, and he couldn't see the point. And so he went to Lord Brahma, we are told, and complained. And Lord Brahma said, "No worries, I'll take care of it." Lord Brahma showed up one day at the house, at the palace of Indra, disguised as a Brahmin. Indra welcomed him as Indra is wont to do, to welcome the Brahmins. He brought him into his reception hall, the sabha, and sat him down, and they were going to begin discussion. What do you want to, what brings you here? And Lord Brahma started to laugh. And he kept laughing, and he kept laughing. And Lord Indra became nervous. What are you laughing about? And he just kept laughing. What are you laughing about? Please, please. He became desperate to know, what are you laughing about? And finally, when he could sort of control himself, Lord Brahma, as this young Brahmin boy, said, it just strikes me, I'm just so amused, because you see this line of ants that's now crawling across your floor. Yes, I see this line of ants. Well, I have to say it, you were one of those ants, and you could become one again. So palaces, one association we may have of the idea of palace is they are places of opulence, but they may be place of extravagance, of unnecessary opulence. Is that what we're supposed to understand with respect to what we're reading here? Does Devahuti need 7 floors in this palace? Well, it seems that at least initially, as she's introduced to this Vimana, that she doesn't think so. She's rather, seems to be embarrassed by the situation. This seems to be over the top, so to say. What we can understand is that Kardama Muni is a very powerful yogi, so much so that he can make such an elaborate arrangement for meeting and being with his wife. So much so that indeed there are 7 stories. Now, this is a detail, but I found it curious that in the translation, Srila Prabhupada mentioned 7 stories because I couldn't see it directly in the Sanskrit. I looked in some commentaries, didn't see it in the commentaries either. Then I looked in the Monier Williams Sanskrit English Dictionary under Vimana, and he explains Vimana is a celestial airplane and so on. And then he says, some Vimanas are said to have 7 stories. Hare Krishna. Well, not only that, but then I came across, will I find it again? In the Aishvarya Kadambini, there's a description of Nanda's palace. Do you want to hear a little about it? Okay. First he describes, this is from Srila Baladev Vidyabhushana, and I suspect that Baladev Vidyabhushana had some fun when he was writing this. In any case, he says, the palaces, towers, and groves shine with colorful gems. The shops are in a straight line, as are the wells and lakes. This is describing the city of Nandishwar. I was just there a few days ago. I didn't perceive this, I must say. The city is attractive with 8 huge, beautiful cowsheds with jeweled arches at the gates. In those sheds are guards ornamented with gold, supporting the king. In the center of the city is the pure palace of Nanda. Here it is, 7 stories high, with fluttering flags. The pillars, latticework, pinnacles, and roof projections are made of Vaidurya, coral, and sapphires. And a couple of other verses, I won't read the whole thing, but I was struck by this. It says, this is verse 7 of section 3, chapter 3. It says, Nirasta Māyābhiḥ vicitra-mālyābhiḥ vaso ramaya nikhilarchitasya subha subhananda nripasya yasmin samajita shilpi virājitam. Though the palace is devoid of Maya, it has various types of Maya. And then in parentheses, Bhanu Swami has put mercy, because the word Maya can mean mercy, can also mean magic. It is the residence of Lakshmi, who is worshipped by all people. The palace of Nanda, who gives joy to all, shines unsurpassed by the best of craftsmen. So I think of much the first 9 cantos of the Bhagavatam, in many respects, are anticipating the 10th canto. And we may want to say that this description of this flying palace of Kardama is anticipating what is not explicit in the 10th canto, but is elaborated by Baladev Vidyabhushana in his Aishvarya Kadambini. He also says, in the same chapter, verses 12 and 13, Bandana krashima kardama shabda kesha madhyam rig anabhishu yasmin chamaradishu cha dandaninada sormita ratasarita sarit sarasishu. In that city, the word tying means tying the hair. Thin, in quotation marks, means slender-waisted. Mud means musk, ointment. Stick, for punishment, refers only to the handle of a chamara. Crying out refers only to the sound of waves in the moving river or lake. Sharpness refers only to the glances of young women, and hardness refers to young women's breasts. Having holes refers to pearls, and crookedness refers to curls in the hair. So what is this about? I suggest this is about suggesting what we understand from the Brahma Samhita, Shriya Kanta Kanta Paramapurusha Kalpataravo Druma Bhumis Chintamani Ganamayi Toyamamritam Kata Ganam Natyam Gamanamapi Vamshi Priyasaki Chidanandam Jyoti Paramapita Svadyamapicha. So every word in the spiritual world is what? It's a song. So in a similar way, he's saying here, every word that has a negative connotation in this world has a positive connotation in the spiritual world. This is spiritual poetry. And this is what we're getting in the Bhagavatam, even already, you can say, in the third canto, in the description of this wonderful Vimana, in which Devahuti and Kardama will soon be passing their time. So I'll stop there. And if any of you have a comment, correction, a question on anything we've touched on, I think we have some time. Yes.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Maharaj, for a very eloquent, thought-provoking class. On this topic of yoga siddhis, yes, devotees are not supposed to think about them too much or think about obtaining them, but isn't there a kind of bhakti yoga siddhis, such as Srila Prabhupada exemplified? Wherever he went, all kinds of devotional magic would happen. And devotees became empowered. And Prabhupada was empowered. After he passed on, we came to understand Shaktivesh avatar. So this concept of Shaktivesh, empowerment of a devotee, isn't that a kind of siddhi?
Yes, I would say we can understand in that way. Siddhi simply means perfection. And ṣaṭ-aṅghribhiḥ, sometimes devotees say ṣaṭ-aṅghribhiḥ. It's not ṣaṭ-aṅghribhiḥ, it's ṣaṭ-aṅghribhiḥ. It's a long A, it makes a difference. Means consumed or possessed with Shakti. So it's a way of saying, we could say like that, perfection. Certainly it's the bhakti yoga perfection, right? If we want to keep to the language of yoga and siddhi in relation to yoga, we can say that Srila Prabhupada demonstrated bhakti yoga siddhi in so many ways. With every step he took. I think
this category, Shaktivesh avatar,
Shakti-aṅghribhiḥ.
But with the caveat avatar, so Prabhupada was Jiva soul, but empowered by Krishna, by Shakti, to take Krishna consciousness around the world as he did. Now, can't it also be understood that various devotees in the Hare Krishna movement get some level of empowerment? It's not simply Shakti-avesh avatar, but Shakti-avesh.
Yes, why not? I remember the late Kardama Swami Maharaj used to like to emphasize this aspect, character of Chaitanya Charitamrita. He said that Chaitanya Charitamrita is all about empowerment of devotees, how he empowered devotees, and then these devotees exercise their powers. So we can recognize, and that's very much the business of Vaishnavas, is to recognize, to acknowledge the accomplishments, the Siddhis of each other, of devotees. Now, do we want to put technical designations on devotees like Shakti-avēsha? Well, you could. Wouldn't see any harm in that. Some devotees might get nervous with that, but if you understand the meaning of the words, then it's just using Sanskrit words to describe what you mean you are seeing a person as having.
Thank you very much.
Yes, Radhika Nagari.
Thank you, Maharaj. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you for the description of the,
Yes.
Just wondering, this is the Amala Purana, Bhagavatam. Everything is pure, perfect. And now we hear this description, which is going to culminate in Kardama Muni and the Bhuti enjoying for 100 autumns before conceiving the children. So, the description of, in the 10th canto, of this opulence, it makes sense. It's very easy to understand, but how do we understand that this was required, this kind of level of indulgence, which is contrary to our, understanding of conception?
Okay. We are reminded of the exalted position of both, isn't it? Kardama. Well, first of all, this is a description, in a sense, it partakes of a creation story of the cosmic creation in the beginning of the cosmos. This is still early history. And Kardama Muni is a rishi. He's a rishi. He's a sage. The 100 years, what we can, understand 100 years, may be differently understood for him and for them. So there's the time relativity question. There is still, recognizing or acknowledging your question, there is this question that can come up for us. How is it? Sometimes this is one example where it seems like what we're reading about is, I think you used the word indulgence, and we wonder about that. This would be a case where we need to see the bigger the arc of the story. If we would stop with this description that's given in this chapter, then we certainly would be justified in being concerned about this, because dharma projita kaitavotra. But understanding what happens after this, how Devahuti experiences feelings of disgust, which brings me back to a possible comparison with sati. Sati felt disgust. It specifically says that she says, before she gives up her body, she says, if one has taken poison, the best remedy is to vomit. That's an expression of disgust. Gustos, it has to do with taste. So it's distaste. She's disgusted. And so her way of vomiting is to give up her body entirely. Devahuti is also disgusted, although I'd have to look if any of the language suggests that, but in this case, her disgust is with herself, which is interesting. But in her disgust, she's also honest with herself. And so what we read about this indulgence, her disgust has all the more, we can appreciate it all the more, I would say. We can appreciate she's overcoming all of that, and thereby giving, of course, a lesson for readers or listeners. That's how I would take it. Yes, Ramesh Prabhu.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that class, Mark.
Hare Krishna.
I have a different take on this concept of indulgence.
Good.
Just like if you go into the temple of Lord Nrsingadev and the one they're building for our main deities at the TOVP, someone could say, this is so opulent. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous. And someone else might say, why are you spending so much money on that? Just print books.
Yeah.
And this is not good. This is an indulgence. So those thoughts are there on our human platform. But my view of this is that there's no limit to the opulence of what we want to present to Krishna for his pleasure. And I keep thinking that this home, just like when we create homes and we think of our home as a temple for Krishna, I keep thinking that Devahuti and Kardama, every part of this home, the whole time, they're always thinking of Krishna. And their desire to have children and unite is for Krishna's pleasure. And so this whole opulent mansion, the 7-story floating unbelievable mansion with gardens, and the descriptions a little earlier are mind-boggling. This is just their offering to Krishna to get them in the mood for having children for Krishna. That's how I look at it.
Nice.
It's not an indulgence.
Very good. Thank you. Any oh, Kishore.
Maharaj, you spoke about, I think, 3 approaches that scholars have on this kind of descriptions, or if I understood correctly. You described 2, but I'm not sure about the third one. You said first is reductionist, they kind of negate the experience. The second one, they
Phenomenology.
phenomenon, yeah. They recognize the phenomenon.
Yeah.
And the third one I didn't quite understand.
The third actually is specifically what I'm referring to, was proposed by a devotee scholar. And that is, take the metaphysics of Sankhya. Take it seriously. Metaphysics of Sankhya is about doing this, as I said, a kind of deconstruction, which is described once or twice, second canto, in relation to preparing to give up the body and so on, a kind of inversion of the evolutes of the Sankhya system. So take it with that, take the yoga of mysticism think about it in relation to Sankhya metaphysics, and what you can find is it makes perfect sense that you do the homework of working through and again deconstructing everything of Prakriti in such a way that Prakriti then comes transformed, it becomes ready to serve, we would say, in this case for a bhakti yogi, the devotee.
So in other words, it's a faithful approach.
Yeah, we can say it's a faithful, scholarly faithful,
Yeah, right.
analytical. Yes, good. I think we can end there for today. I wish you all a wonderful day today, and Gaur Premanande. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Grantaraj Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam ki jai, Gaur Premanande.